I just thought that.
I'd like to call the meeting to order. If we can stand and say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We have no visitors signed in wishing to speak and no written communication. Do we have any committee reports, board reports?
The audit committee met with Treasurer Wilkie and Charles is for
Okay.
A couple of ECASB things. So I went to the Budget and Finance Committee and also went to the Delegate Assembly meeting. And one thing that was interesting from the Delegate Assembly meeting is that now that there's the legislation for student representation on the board, ECASB is talking about putting together programming and newsletters and things like that to support the students and provide resources the same way that they do for boards and also done for the district clerks. So it's a nice expansion of what ECASB does. And upcoming meetings, there's going to be a November 21st meeting. It's called Fall Speedboarding, where there'll be 3 or 4 short presentations. And the presentations right now are going to be Lackawanna School District talking about how they've dealt with phones this year because they took phones out of classes. And Cheektowaga is going to talk about the Restorative Practice Program, and Lakeshore is going to talk about the elective classes, and there might be one more. So just a couple interesting ECASB things coming up.
Great. Anyone else? Nice.
I just figured out something on that technology.
All right, well, it's up
Yeah,
for your report now.
thank you. So we do have Charles ready to report remotely. Man, this mouse is funky.
Is it my turn?
Yes.
All right, thank you, and good evening. Thanks for having me remotely. This will serve as the audit presentation for the district for the year ended June 30th, 2024. I did get a chance to meet last week with the audit committee to go into a little bit more detail than we will today, more of an overview. But I will take any questions, and as I understand, the numbers that you are seeing now, that you will be seeing, are numbers based on resolutions that are going up in this board meeting, I believe. So assuming everything goes forward with these resolutions, these numbers are going to be good to go. So we are in draft form. We're still going through our quality control review process. But at this point, we've gone back and forth with the business office to make sure that we're on the same page. So here we go. Did everyone see this?
Yep.
Okay. So what you will be getting from this audit doesn't change from what you've been getting in the past. So the main reason we are hired is to provide an opinion on the basic financial statements themselves. Financial statements include our opinion at the very front on our letterhead that basically talks about whether these financial statements can be relied upon by your third parties, the outside users, whether it's the banks, credit agencies, whether it's residents, or members as the board. The opinion that we're moving forward with this year is an unmodified opinion. Again, it's a clean opinion. It's the best you can receive. Basically says that we ran a series of tests. We do not believe that there's any material misstatements included in these financial statements, so they can be relied upon as an audit done by an independent third party. Throughout the financial statement, after then you get the basic financial statement themselves, then you get footnotes that talk about what's in the statements, and then you get some part supplementary information that adds a little bit of language on your numbers, and then at the end you have 2 more opinions that are going to be on our letterhead. One of those is on government auditing standards, which basically says that for us to rely on your data and to make sure it's free of material misstatement, we have to look at your internal controls to see if there's any deficiencies that we have to communicate that would potentially mislead these numbers. So we don't provide an opinion on your controls, but we do look at it as the input data creates the output. And so all your policies, your procedures, we are anticipating moving forward again with no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, essentially findings that would potentially impact those numbers. So a clean audit all around as far as numbers and internal controls. The very last opinion is on your federal rewards. So as a recipient of over $750,000 in federal aid, we essentially put on a federal agent auditor hat, and we audit different programs every year based on materiality threshold, based on a cycle, to make sure that you're spending those federal funds the way the federal government wants you to spend it. So all the compliance is being followed, whether it's reporting, whether it's eligibility for students, whether it's the spending of those monies or the cash management of those monies. So this year we tested the special education cluster. Again, it's on a rotational basis, so every year your large dollar programs gets covered. So for example, last year we tested some ARPA funds. The year before might have been child nutrition cluster, so this year we focused on the special education cluster. Again, we ran a series of 25 disbursements. We ran a sample of eligible students, and the compliance came back that you are complying in your costs and your eligibility requirements. So all around, 3 opinions on our letterhead, 3 clean opinions that the district is expected to move forward with this year. The management letter is an opportunity where we get to communicate some future accounting pronouncements and best practices that we see. We will have the opportunity to audit a number of local school districts. So we often communicate matters that may impact a lot of districts based on the year, whether it's the spending of COVID monies, the COVID cliff, for example, kind of dwindling down those funds and go back to normal operations. We'll potentially issue some best practices there. Auditor communications letter, that's the qualitative aspects of the audit. So as the audit committee overseeing the general audit this year, just like every other year, these are the pretty lengthy conversation that we have with that group, which is what we had last year. Essentially for your group, there's no new pronouncements that impact how these financials look. There's no new restatement. There's no significant estimates that change from one year to the other. So really, there's nothing to highlight for this group here. No significant changes from one year to the other. And then the extra classroom activity report is another report that we help compile the district. Essentially, every year we have to test extra classroom spending and use of funds. We issue a financial report on the cash basis of county money in, money out. So what we do there is we look at the ledgers that the student maintained, we make sure that the compliance with New York State guidance is being followed, and again, we test 25 receipts, we test 25 disbursements across programs, across clubs, and we make sure that they follow the guides that are listed. So we didn't find any significant matters to report here. A few extra classroom clubs that we've noticed activities haven't existed for 2 years. The guide basically says it hasn't existed for 2 years. Funds need to be reverted, but again, it's not significant. There's not many clubs, and oftentimes it's a matter of, we haven't used this particular program in the last 2 years, but we're still discussing it. We're still having meetings about it. So there's no issues to report on. So clean audit on the extra activity report. More in the quantitative aspects of your audit. Here you see a 5-year chart of how your revenues have compared to your expenditures, your spending in the general fund. And so to put numbers on this chart, your revenues, far right, for the year end of June 30, 2024 was $77.4 million. Your expenditures, your spending, the red line was $76.2 million. So the difference, that little gap there, is $1.2 million increase in fund balance. When you take a step back and you look at 5 years, this is the type of chart that if you were to be audited by the OSC or someone's looking at how you're doing financially, it's always good to see 5 years where there's ups and downs, where there's going to be years where you're generating a little bit of fund balance, and there's going to be years where you're spending down the fund balance, where your expenditures are exceeding your revenue. That's exactly what we're seeing here. Every year, there's ups and downs, where your revenues are going to exceed there's no consecutive years where you're either spending too much or you're raising your revenues are higher than your expenditures. So it's a great chart to take a step back and look at overall. On a 5-year level, you're pretty much right on par, your blue line with your red line, meaning that you're generating just enough revenues to provide the services of your promise, your budget. So the main highlights here, again, $1.2 million of change in fund balance this year. Your revenues did increase by $6.6 million from the prior year. A lot of that was being able to maximize your state funding. Might not be something that is going to be coming at significant levels if the levels are going to maintain in the future. But again, $5.4 million, that's $6.6 million increase is BOCES basic formula aid. Also included in this year was highlighted by some interest earnings that came up high, and again, sales tax continued to outpace the expectation, which is potentially going to slow down in future years. Sales tax has been one over the last 3 years and have outperformed by far expectations across the board in local municipalities and school districts. On the trend level, over 5 years, your revenues are growing at 7.3% per year. Again, that's not sustainable. A lot of those are one-time revenues or those unanticipated excess, whether it's sales tax, the state aid, especially coming back from the special aid fund, some of the costs were allocated, and now we're done with some interest earnings coming in high, which the market always dictates on a 20-year basis, so always levels out. So just to keep an eye on, revenues did, again, go 7.3% per year for the last 5 years. Expenditures grew at $5.9 million from the prior year. 1.6 of that was employee benefits, but the bulk was providing services to the students in the form of $4.4 million increase there. Again, what I mentioned a little bit earlier is under the pandemic and being able to be reimbursed under the CRISA funds and ARPA funds. A lot of those positions were put in the AFCON special aid fund to claim reimbursement. Those came back to the general fund, so it was always going to be interesting to see how that was going to impact the end of the pandemic. As you can see, of course, it did jump up a lot, but in the future it's expected to level out a little bit. But just one to keep an eye on. Again, expenditures over this 5 years did grow at 8.5% per year. Again, that's misleading considering 2020 costs went down with the pandemic, and now maximizing that aid definitely costed up. So just to keep an eye on in the future. And also a lot of your spending was put to good use in one-time spending for capital projects. Just over 2 years, more than $6 million has been allocated on one-time costs. So definitely should be considered when evaluating the year-to-year increases in expenditures. Fund balance totals, as you can see here, steady growth as I highlighted in the line chart. Years where you're generating fund balance, years where you're using fund balance, and this chart shows perfectly ups and downs every other year. And so at the end of 2023-2024, total fund balance is $11.4 billion. That's broken out into 2 categories. A more restricted category, which is mostly your reserves, increased to $6.9 million. So again, when you have these good years of revenues, it's always good to plan for the future, and that's what you're seeing. And then the following year, you end up using some of it. So that's exactly how it's supposed to be designed. At the end of 23-24, $6.9 million is your reserves. It increased $1.7 million in capital project, which I believe is what is being on the agenda today. And employee benefits, $500,000. Planning again for the future. Your blue line is your unrestricted, unassigned and assigned fund balance. That did go down by almost $1 million. And that's really to get back into compliance with Section 1318 of the real property tax law, which allows school districts to have fund balance, maintain fund balance under 4% unassigned. And that's what we see on the next slide. Is your compliance. As you can see, the last few years have been pretty unknown since the pandemic hit. So in 2020, 2021, and Amherst is not an outlier here. I think it was almost the norm where districts exceeded 4% in 2020 and 2021. It's more a transparent way of saying, hey, sales tax did come up a lot higher than we were told it was going to be. We got additional state aid. We do have a plan to use these monies, but until it's formulated and known, we're going to maintain fund balance at higher levels, and that's what happened with the 6.6% in 2020 and 2021. Last year, similar fashion, additional funding was received. we weren't, it wasn't known if it was going to be held back a future year, so the district did maintain fund balance above that 4% at 4.9. But again, all efforts are always to stay within the law, and that's what we see this year at 2023, 2024, back down to 4%. So that's the financial audit, as quick and informative as I could. Some observation, I went in more detail with the audit committee. The highlight really is for this year to no control deficiencies, that we are, again, including the financial statements. Was a little more challenging this year with new staff, new turnover, and delineating between the responsibilities in the business office. A lot more journal entries were received this year than we've had in the past, but all our efforts are to reduce those in the future. So it was a clean audit overall, and yeah, I welcome any questions.
Well, no one has their hand up right now, so we're going to assume there aren't any questions. Superintendent Pennell and the board, thank you so much for your flexibility in allowing us to have this presentation virtually. Normally this is an in-person presentation, but last minute we had a schedule conflict, so Charles, thank you also for making this work in your schedule so that we can maintain our timeline. Just one small correction to the information Charles shared. The resolutions that he's referring to are the funding of our reserves, and what we have done is in June we passed those resolutions up to a maximum dollar amount. We did discuss them again in August, and we're well within those limits, which helped us get down to our 4%. So it was a little bit higher than where we thought we would be when we did the August presentation, but not significantly, and we just put the extra funds into the capital reserve for future projects. So this is the presentation, so you have the draft documents. I believe they're loaded in Board Docs for you. We'll continue to work with the audit firm and our staff to make sure we double check everything and make sure everything is accurate, and then we'll finalize, and this will be on the agenda on October 3rd for your official approval, and then we will submit to the state and the controller and the clearinghouse and all the different places we submitted to by the October 15th deadline.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much, Charles.
Thank you. Thanks, Charles.
Thank you, Lauren, and thanks everyone for accommodating.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going down memory lane on that second last slide when we had 6.6% in our unassigned fund balance. And I can't remember all the factors, but it was like the perfect storm of potential financial pitfalls that year. The one that rings the bell the most was we had a governor at the time that was threatening mid-year cuts. So as he had said, we weren't an outlier. Most school districts decided to exceed the 4% because the governor was pretty vociferous in his threats about mid-year cuts. And if that happened, we didn't want to be in a situation where we had to make mid-year cuts to programming or staffing. So very interesting looking at that chart and going back down memory lane, but there was other factors going on at the same time. I think that was also some litigation as well with that open window of Child Victims Act. So interesting walk down memory lane, but glad to hear we have a clean audit and we're in compliance moving forward. So that's all we have for the superintendent's report for tonight.
Okay, great. You'll need a motion for new business then.
I'll make a motion to approve item D, consent of new business personnel financial items.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of approving regular business item D, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. I'd like to welcome Cassandra Woodworth to the team. If you wouldn't mind, we always ask somebody to just stand up, tell us your name, what building you're going to be in, what you're doing.
Absolutely. So Cassandra Woodworth, I am the new fourth grade special ed teacher at Smallwood. I'm an ICT remote navigator, so I'm very excited. It's a breath of fresh air.
Well, welcome aboard.
Thank you, everyone.
Ms. Custodi, do we have any follow-up action items? All right, then we will need a motion to convene to executive session.
Make a motion to convene to executive session for matters regarding negotiations.
We have a second? All those in favor of convening to executive session, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0.